Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Game Masters Happy Hour. Thank you for joining us this evening, this Tuesday night. How are my companions doing this evening? Let's start with Griffin from the
Dude.
Hideous Laughter podcast. How are you doing today?
I am just rocking and rolling, man. Excited to get another one of these sessions. Last time we went way long. Let's see if we can top it.
Holy crap.
New record
A
time.
GM gauntlet.
Yeah, right.
Challenge accepted.
Oh boy.
I need
What
more.
are our filibustering rules?
Oh
Right.
boy. I don't think we
haven't-
established.
Yeah, we haven't
Okay.
written those bylaws yet.
Pre-game.
So,
That's what I
yeah.
heard.
We're gonna have to get the Discord chat on that one.
Yeah.
Drinking a little whiskey though, enjoying myself.
Nice. You got a little whiskey. What's going on in Hideous Laughter world?
Oh man, we're about to record the finale of book 3. Should be starting however many. We're probably not going to release it in many parts, but however many parts that fight takes, Thursday. So good stuff.
Nice.
Getting ready to
Nice.
be halfway done, man.
Halfway done with the Carrion Crown Adventure Path.
Good milestone.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be feeling it. That's got to be like it's like not just halfway, but almost finishing something to a degree, right? Because I think after book 3, then like the whole thing shifts, right? The whole,
Yeah.
you know, you're
The
getting
focus
in-
changes. It
right.
becomes
right.
a kind of different adventure after book 3. So
Yeah.
it's I'm ready. I'm ready to run a book by Greg Vaughn because I know that's gonna end in a lot of player tears.
He wrote the first book of Second Darkness.
He's relatively notorious for some pretty brutal modules. So looking forward to that. I think it's gonna be a good time.
Well, let's just connect that right over there to Allard from the Dice Crisis. How are you doing this evening?
Doing well over here. Drinking a little scotch tonight.
Nice. Keeping it classy.
Keeping it classy. It kind of paralleling Griff a little bit. We are just finishing up book 2 of Second Darkness. Recording wise, we're a few episodes behind on the release, but that's ramping up. And
Nice.
I don't know. I think it's going to be a good few episodes coming up. So excited for that. If in other news, we're just continuing on, day by day, just like anybody else.
Day by day, living.
Day by
surviving.
day, just doing
Just
it.
surviving, man.
Yeah, man.
All right.
You know.
Well, Tyler, how are you doing? From Min Max, talk to me about it. What's going on with you and your world?
Man, things are going really good. I'm just sitting here chilling with my Corona tonight. Definitely the cheapie out of the group, but it felt appropriate. It feels appropriate lately, regardless. Obviously. No, we're actually recording wise. We are finishing up chapter 1 in book 2, and but as far as release goes, this week is a big release for us. No spoilers, but it's probably the shakiest event that my party has come across so far.
Wow.
And
I'm
teaser there.
I'm really excited to see how people take it. Let's just say I've got my "fuck you, Tyler" emoji all prepped in my Discord server for it. So
Perfect. Gotta have
yeah.
that.
Otherwise, everything's been going good, man.
That's good to hear, man. I'm really glad to hear that, and I'm glad to be here. I'm Adam from Southern Tomfoolery, and we are getting into the real meat and potatoes, as it were, of Signal of Screams. Things are starting to get real spooky these days for the Southern Tomfoolery and the Apollo Protection Agency crew. We're having a good time with it. I know I've mentioned to you before that I had a lot of nerves going into it with all the NPCs and everything, but I think it's come together good, and we're past that part of it to some degree, and so I'm ready to really lay in.
Good.
Yeah, you hit that
But-
comfort level, right? After a while at it.
Yeah, right.
Get used
Like
to
you
the
kind of just
NPCs.
get right. Yeah, I feel more like in their skin, you know.
Hmm.
So anyways, I'm glad that we're all in a good mood here and we're so far along in our projects. But what we're here to talk about today is actually the beginning of our projects, or session zeros, right? And so our focus today is to talk about what do we do as GMs with our players to set up our campaigns. You know, we'll talk a little bit about just campaigns in general. We may talk some about podcasting, although I do think we covered some of that in our first episode of GM Happy Hour, but I'm sure we'll kind of touch on it some. But yeah, we're going to talk about backgrounds, character creation, you know, setting the mood, how much story do you give ahead of time, you know, all those types of things. So I'm going to go reverse around and I want to start with Tyler.
Yeah.
So
So
what does a session zero mean to you?
session zero means two vastly different things to me, and it entirely depends on the table that I'm playing with. I would say that if I'm doing session zero with my crew, we've been playing together for a very long time now. Session zero for us is just we hop on the Discord chat and we just shoot ideas at each other until everything starts to settle in and really sync. And that's something that we love, building characters, and that's one of the things that we all really get in and get excited about doing. So when it comes time for that, we talk about, you know, mechanically how everybody plays together, how the synergy of the group happens with the you know, the characters that they're looking at rolling up. And usually the way that we handle it when it comes to, you know, providing that flavor, we like to get the mechanics that we're interested in into characters first, and then we actually use those character builds and how they're mechanically built. Let me say mechanically 5 more times, and actually build backstories off of that. And we kind of have these little building blocks, because of course it depends on whether or not you're doing an AP or you're doing a homebrew. But usually if you're doing an AP, it's relatively simple. Everybody gets the theme right out of the gate. You know, you send them the splash text, they get the player's guide. You know, the adventure and the publishers do a lot of that groundwork for the story for you, in a sense, in those player's guides. So of course, you know, we'll let them read through that.
Players' guides would be nice. Just throw that out there to
Wouldn't they?
Starfinder team.
Just like modules,
They don't
man.
have
It
any?
all comes back.
Yeah. So yeah, and that goes back to, it totally depends on what we're playing. If I'm taking a new group through something, my session zero looks completely different. Because in before my players give me bullshit in the Discord chat, when I'm playing with new people, I start first and foremost with the social contract that the table's going to have. You have to understand how the players are going to work together before you can really figure out how the players' characters are going to work together. So that's something that I really, really like to focus on. And when I say social contract, what I'm really looking for is like players' comfort levels. You know, what are definite red flags or the red X card, definite no-nos for any particular player. Anything that they're excited about exploring, what makes the game fun for them, and just kind of build from that. A lot of times that, you know, expectation of what the players are looking to get out of the game really helps me as a game master figure out the best way to present that game to them. So I don't want to take up all the time. I could talk about session zeros forever.
Yeah.
And
No,
filibuster. Filibustering okay.
Filibuster.
Filibuster.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. Well, Allard, how are session zeros for you and your players and your team?
All right. Well, so I've only had one session zero so far, so I haven't had the opportunity to really need to have this kind of social contract thing kind of worked out, because like I've known the people that I've GM'd with for a number of years now, so I feel like we've kind of already figured out our social contracts with each other in a way, just from understanding and still being friends over the years. But for mine, I guess starting with character creation, I gave him the player's guide, and since the player's guide for Second Darkness was still 3.5, we couldn't really use a lot of the stuff in it for character creation, but it was good to just kind of give the flavor of the town. So I expanded on that in our actual session 0, and since all the characters or all my players decided to make characters that are all from Riddleport, I basically made a big PowerPoint just explaining Riddleport and everything that the characters would know from living there for however long. And I think that was like an hour of just like doing whatever. And then I kind of let the people roll knowledge checks for a couple extra things that they know. And like one person heard about like a serial killer that's in town and some little things like that. So yeah, I think a lot of my session 0 was just explaining to my players the town that they're living in, and like the movers and shakers of that town. And even in our recorded session 0, I pretty much explained every major crime boss in Riddleport and a lot of the major features of the town. And I just wanted to give that flavor and cement them into a setting right up front, so they can have some knowledge to then go and explore and feel like they're not quite just like catching up to everything. And so they have some knowledge to kind of be a little bit more proactive with their approach to the game. And I think that kind of panned out well. The one thing I told them that they needed to do well or for the beginning of the story was give me a reason your character is going to be at the Golden Goblin for that tournament. That's just kind of the hook into the whole AP. So I was like, your character, they're going to go there for some reason. And everybody kind of had a different reason. And I also said that since Riddleport doesn't have a huge elven society or community in it, that like if you're going to be an elf, you have to give me a backstory and like that links you to this place. And only one person is going to be able to start as an elf from this town, if any.
Two things
Yes.
from that. I love that you made a PowerPoint. I smiled so hard when I heard you say that. Second, I really like the pre-game skill checks and playing that into backstory, especially with them being from the town. That is a really cool way to play in their characters and, you know, what they know from the starting city before you even begin. And who doesn't love rolling dice? Honestly.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I try to incorporate rolling dice into as much as I can, you know.
Yeah.
Just in the day to day. Well,
good. Griffin, you know, you have anything to add here as far as the base of what a session 0 is?
I like to do mine in person. I know, you know, some people like to go back and forth via email and do that kind of stuff. I like my players to be able to build their characters together. I think that tends to lead to a better synergized team if everybody's really considering what everybody else is making. What I really like to do, the player's guide does a great job of this sometimes it doesn't. When you're running an AP and you have the player's guide, a lot of times it'll help with characters that want to play a ranger, that kind of thing. What kind of enemies can you expect here? I will usually expand upon that because I don't want people to feel useless if they decide to be a ranger and decide to, you know, in Carrion Crown, pick favorite enemy aberration in book 1. Like, no, it's not necessarily going to help you out. So I'll guide those decisions. But what I also like to do is kind of as the players are making their characters, I like when they come up with concepts so that I can kind of bring some of the obscure archetypes. I really like to include those in my games, and I can bring some of the more obscure archetypes that would fit their character concept in. Like I came up with the idea for Matumbe to be a living Grimoire Inquisitor. Like that was my input. I was like, hey, this is the kind of character that you're thinking about playing. check out the flavor of this. Like this could be really cool with a Pharasmin because it's kind of a different perspective on a holy character or a divine caster. But I think that really helps to in something like a Skulls and Shackles campaign, like bringing up those more obscure aquatic archetypes and that kind of thing,
Yeah,
just so
definitely.
that you could say like, hey, this would be a good time to play this, or even as out there as, hey, you know, play a Cavalier in this campaign if you want to. If you want to be a barbarian that rides a mammoth, this would be a good one to do that, or that wouldn't work at all. I think you gotta, as they're building stuff, set the guardrails. Like this isn't gonna work, or we're really gonna have to stretch the what is it? Suspension of disbelief. We're gonna have to really stretch that to make this work. So I like to provide those inputs as they're building the characters.
I'm going to be a mammoth riding barbarian as we go into the Emerald Spire. How's that?
Right.
Sound good?
Right.
Sound good?
Or how big's the front door?
every time. Can I get in the door?
Good thing
So I
my
think-
guy knows stone shape.
Those are the kinds of things I would add. I really like giving character building benefits. So I've talked about this on my show, but in 1E, what I like to do is I give an extra D4 to stats for a good backstory. So if you come up with a good backstory and you work with me to tie it into the campaign, you get a D4. I'll work with any backstory, but if you give me a good one and make it easy for me, you get a D4. If you play an archetype that's interesting and not necessarily optimized, you get another D4. And what those do is you get to roll both D4s and you get to add. So say I rolled a 4 and a 4. I would get to add 1 from each die to 4 stats. So I would get to say, hey, this die has 4 bonus points and this die has 4 bonus points. I can at maximum add a bonus point from each die, but I can allocate them however I want. So I could make it made my PCs more powerful, but the trade-off is that they're not playing necessarily the most optimized characters. And so
they're playing interesting builds too.
Exactly.
On top of that,
yeah. So I like to do that. Incentives for weird stuff.
Yeah, and I think we'll get a little bit more into our roles as GMs and character creation here in a bit. I don't really have anything to add much more than what you guys have already said as far as session zeros go. I will say that it was several games before my group ever did a session 0. You know, like when we first started playing, we were all learning it together and just kind of like, we're just going to do this, and a lot of our first campaign was figuring out some things that you might talk about in a session 0, but we were also like really good friends and all really eager to try this, and 5e makes it kind of easy to just jump in and figure out what you're doing as you go along. And it wasn't until we moved into a campaign that was specifically lethal that I was like, okay, we need to talk about this before we go into it. I want to prepare you guys for what it is. And that's when you start looking into things that are the discussion points for session zeros. And we talk all the time in our group text. That's popping off all the time. And so a lot of times I'll be throwing out ideas for games I want to do 3, 4, 5 months from now. You know what I mean? And we'll kind of be shopping things along the way as we get closer to that. And then we'll sit down when we finally decide to do it and kind of talk about, as you said, what is the general theme? What is your wants out of this particular campaign, and all the things that you guys kind of talked about. I will say that going back to the social contract thing, I think something that's kind of specific to what we're doing, Griffin, with the horror aspects is really drilling down on that. Because you're kind of put in a position in a GM to intentionally make your players uncomfortable, and trying to make sure that you're not crossing that line while getting up to it, and so there's an extra layer of consent and just discussion that needs to happen, even if you know your players, you know, even if they're your family, you know what I mean? Like, you really still need to take that time, because you don't necessarily know everything that could be triggering, you know. I mean, I would have never known that Emily truly is terrified of penguins had I not had that conversation, because who's terrified of penguins?
Truly.
Emily is.
It's blown my mind.
I
Yeah.
found running anything with evil PCs too. That's super
Yeah,
important.
yeah. Well, then you got to set boundaries for
Yeah,
yourself, like,
it
because you're not
gets-
going to put me in a position to, like, you know, create this scenario for you to do things I'm not comfortable with as a GM, right? You know.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
you get to
Yeah.
be a part of that social contract, because you're like, well, you guys might do something bonkers, but I think that's important too for the party. Like, we're playing in a party right now where there's an evil character and good characters, and like, to what extent is that okay? I think that's a conversation you should have too, because it's like, some people are fine with the rogue stealing from the party. It's a dick thing to do, but some people find that is kind of a realistic fantasy thing and allow it to happen. If your group is like that, cool, more power to your rogue. But if they're not like that, cut that shit out immediately, right?
Mhm.
Cut it out from the beginning, from session 0, so it never is a problem.
Session 0 is a really good time to do that too, and it also helps to kind of get on the, you know, preventing the asshole rogue that steals from the party. It's funny how that's such a broadly accepted, like, archetype
Yeah, I
of
guess
this
it's
whole
a trope,
situation.
huh?
It
Yeah,
absolutely is.
It's an
man.
RPG horror story that is now a trope,
Yeah,
because it happens so
absolutely.
often.
It is to help, and then maybe this kind of dives into a bit of the next part of it, but help the characters and expect the players to make characters that want to participate in the adventure that you're putting
Oh my God,
forward.
yes.
That's huge.
Say it again for the people in the back.
Yeah, right? Because if you're playing, like, here, I'll give an example. That we're doing Extinction Curse right now, and if one of the guys came to me and said that they're going to be, you know, creating a lawful good character who is absolutely not okay with any shenanigans of any kind, and, you know, their goal is to be, you know, mayor of Absalom or something like that, I'd be like, no, that's not the place for this game. Go play Agents of Edgewatch, and then we can talk later. But, you know, make a character that fits the beginning of the story and a character that wants to progress through that story.
I think that, you know, we'll go ahead and shift the topic into the GM's role in character creation, because that's definitely a session 0 type of topic here, and I think we're hitting on some good things in being invested in the story that the AP is going, or whatever the homebrew is going. You know, kind of, that's part of the contract, right? As you're saying, you want to say yes, and I will go on this adventure, you know, and try to do the things that would take me along this adventure. That doesn't mean you're giving up agency. You can sidetrack here and there, but you have to want, as, you know, I've heard it before, you don't make a character that has a happy family waiting for you at home, because, I mean, you can, but that makes it really difficult for you to be gone for 6 years on an epic adventure. You know what I mean? Like, but you know, you don't want to go too far into the trope of all my family was killed by the big bad guy, and, you know, which we did a little bit in Southern Tomfoolery. But the point is that, you know, you want to be an adventurer. You want to be somebody who's motivated to go on adventures and be in harmful situations. You know what I mean? And work with others. Unless you're playing a solo campaign, you and a GM, making somebody who's an edgelord who has no interest in working with others is pretty crappy to the rest of your players.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Play with.
You know, like, you can be dark and you can be brooding and you can have an edge to you and still say, hey, I may not trust the world, but I'll trust these folks, you know. And if you want to play a little arc to get you to that, fine, but you got to be heading in that direction. And then backstory, right? There's got to be a balance where you leave some gaps in your backstory as a player that you can fill in later as the main story develops. And one thing that I try to tell my players and any players that I'm bringing into an adventure is that the adventure should be the most interesting part of this person's life. You know what I mean? Like, or the most growing part of this person's life. You know, you can have a very interesting backstory. You can have these events that kind of shaped who you are. But if that's like, if all your best stories are in your glory days and not in the adventure we're about to run, then you're doing a disservice to the character within the present narrative. And so many times when I'm a player, the rare times that I find that I can fill in those gaps way more informed as I get further into the adventure. So then I can write my backstory to shape what's going on in the present. You know what I mean? Like, to have that kind of dichotomy that connects the two.
And to kind of put that in a metaphor, I try to tell new players this when I'm running new people through any system, whatever system it is. But the backstory should be the canvas that the adventure is going to paint on your character's story, right? Which goes to what you're saying there, Adam. You know, it's you want the most exciting thing for that character's overall story from the beginning of their story to the end of it to be the adventure you're about to go on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And again, having the room to fill in, I think is really crucial. You know, leaving those gaps and allowing the GM to have a little bit of wiggle room with it. You know, like, say, hey, I know some things about where this story is going that you don't. Let's make this little adjustment here, and this will just fine tune and bring you further into the narrative in a way that you just got to trust me on, right? Because I've read all 6 books of the AP or whatever it is. It's like, you can, if you had this interaction, which is kind of accomplishes the same thing but has this specific thing in it, we can do some cool shit, you know. And being
Right.
willing to not be so precious with your backstories, and don't give a GM a 30-page short story, you know, like, because then you're putting it on the GM to try to incorporate all that in to what's going on, and that ain't gonna happen, you know.
I agree and disagree with you on that. And the only reason I disagree is because one of my players has a tendency to throw 12 to 15 page backstories at me. However,
Same.
yeah, right. The bulk of the story, or of all those pages or all those words, ends up being prose, as opposed to, you know, when so and so was 2 years old, they had, you know, their mother died from diphtheria. When, you know, they were 3 years old, this happened. It's not like
Yeah.
sequential, but it's
whole
like actually,
timeline.
yeah, exactly. It's like writing out an entire scene and actually have just that scene be a very small piece
Yeah,
of
that's
that entire story,
obviously I'm
right?
a big fan of that. I mean, we
Yeah.
do flashbacks regularly in a prose style thing, a detailed scene from that person's history. I'm all about that. What I don't want is 15 flashbacks before we play session 1. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, let's get into our characters. Let's get a feel for them. Let's see how they mesh with the other characters. Maybe there's something in the other characters' backstory that can connect the characters. Maybe, you know, like, don't pigeonhole yourself into a encyclopedia of history before we even get started.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do with like how that particular player is writing that backstory, right? It's about their style. I mean, somebody can get out, you know, 15 pages worth of backstory information in 2 pages. Would I prefer to read the 2-page one? Maybe. Depends on how detailed you're getting, right? There are, you know, gray areas when it comes to this sort of thing.
There's always exceptions.
There's
right?
always gray areas. Yeah.
And I think that, like, from my perspective, with my example with the Dice Crisis, my players didn't give me a lot of details in their backstory. Like, the most they gave me was what their family situation was. They all said that they had probably met at some point, and so with that, I was able to come up with these kind of flashback prose scenes that satisfied their vague backstory of meeting, but also kind of tied back into somewhat thematically, maybe just visually, the moment that's happening in the progressive story. And I think it's nice being able to have that kind of vagary to fill in the details that match it up to our present timeline.
Yeah, I think
So,
my players are both sides of the spectrum, as I'm sure you guys have just said. You have a player that writes a ton of backstory, and then a player that doesn't really give me much. And so I think my players have different levels of comfort with me taking the wheel on their backstory, which I certainly do, because I'm trying to, for a podcast, and I know we said we'll talk not for a podcast and for a podcast, but for a podcast, you're trying to make a story. And so some things are unknown about people's backstories that I reveal to them. But I think what's been helpful with the inclusion of flashbacks, and I recommend doing that kind of stuff in home games, but I like to, a session or two in advance, say, write me a short flashback about a time your character went through X or a time your character went through Y. And it doesn't have to be a part of their 15-page backstory, right? It can just be a vignette, as most of these flashbacks are, but it's an opportunity to give us a little bit more of your character's personality that doesn't necessarily always come out. And I think that's helpful in having the entire table hear something like that. I mean, I'll use Matumbe from our show as an example, but a lot of times, he just doesn't readily bring up his past. He's not that kind of character. He's the kind of character that likes to, talk about where he is and talk about the future and talk about his current situation and his religion. And he doesn't necessarily delve too far into the past or too far into the things he's done. And
Yeah,
so
I think it's weird to like expect your player characters to just be like, "Hey, we're traveling together. I'm going to tell you my life story."
Right.
Like that's weird. Like that would be weird if somebody did that to me. Hey, we're going on this thing. Let me tell you about how miserable my dad was to me. Like, whoa, dude. Like, hey, let's go and rob a bank here real quick,
Well,
man.
hold
Like,
up.
you think
it's a good narrative device to reveal to everybody at
yeah,
the table.
so the players get some context of the character's decisions without forcing the character to reveal parts of themselves that they would not normally do. I agree wholeheartedly with you, Griffin, on that. Well,
Yeah.
have we
So-
exhausted that topic?
I don't know, because I've been avoiding talking about it with podcast specific information.
Okay.
Because I think when it comes to what we're trying to do is we're trying to build interesting arcs for the characters and place those arcs into the, an existing skeleton. And the one thing we could talk about GM session zeros and homebrew session zeros, but when was the last time any one of us ran a homebrew?
Nope.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been like 9 years or more.
I want to.
I mean, but
it's
you know,
fulfilling,
to
but
some
it's
degree,
time-consuming, right?
Yeah.
Griffin has run some homebrew with the evil interludes.
Yeah, I
you
mean
know?
that's
Sprinkling
all
it in.
made up.
That's all. That's
But-
all homebrewed. Yeah, nice.
But
Mhm.
but like for a homebrew, a session zero is, hey, I need you guys. I mean, for mine, it's a specific example. I need you guys to be part of this organization. Figure out a reason why your characters are part of this organization. I'm tying you into the regular story, so you need to be a part of this organization, at
Mhm.
least for the time being.
Right.
And so that's an easy hook. You need to have a hook. And how do the characters all meet? Well, you meet at a tavern's boring. Paizo Adventures usually have a good way to do that, but I still think your session zero should include at least like how everybody's all together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
really encourage people in my groups to have characters that are related in some way, even if it's
Mhm.
only two of them. to have that that bond with another character is helpful for role play and helpful for introductions. It's easy. I mean, it's human nature. It's easier to introduce yourself to new people when you have your buddy with you than it is to just randomly bump into people and do this inorganic everybody meets in a bar brawl or everybody meets at a festival, right? And so making those opportunities and making sure that, especially for what I did, which was evil, it's like, well, you're not necessarily adventurers, right? Like, you don't need to sign up to be an adventurer.
Right.
You need to sign up to be part of a really shitty organization that's going to do really shitty things. Are you going to be that? Okay, cool. Then, then whatever concept you make, that's cool.
Right. And I think we're all touching on something here that's, you know, individually, it's everything, even your session 0 should be tailored to what adventure you're playing. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's 60%, if not more, of what you're basically getting at a session 0. You know what I mean? Sure, we're doing character creation, but that's tied into the adventure you're playing. Part of it's like, all right, here are some of the things that you should be prepared for as players coming into this. That's it's, you know, session 0 is the kind of launching point of an adventure, right? More so than anything, because we can create characters all day, but if they don't have an adventure to plug into, you're not doing any more sessions. They're just making characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think discussing the adventure path and what it means to the players and to their characters is the crux of most session 0s.
Right.
Now, that other 40% is important. You know, I think we've talked about character. I mean, we could talk forever, but I'm trying to kind of move us through it here a little bit, you know.
I think Haley actually brings up a good point in the chat. I really love reading other tabletop systems session 0. Almost everyone does it better than Pathfinder and D&D. And you can, just because those systems are kind of made more
they're a little more focused.
Yeah, they're more focused. Some of them are made more to be like a one shot, so you really have to get that injection of everybody's character right away. But I think there's a lot of good things that you can take from those sessions or those systems if you want to. Haley brings up Kids on Bikes, like great example of how if everybody lived in the same city, how you could role play how everybody knows each other or what they know about each other. But plenty of systems do a good job at kind of fleshing out a character at the beginning in a way that I don't think every player would think of when they build a backstory and send it to their GM. So I think exploring some of that is certainly a good idea. I haven't personally done it for a Pathfinder session 0, but I would definitely think about doing it for my next one.
Yeah, and I always sent out just kind of random questionnaires, like not even questions that even matter to the story, but just random little things to get the players thinking about their character in the character's sense, like something stupid like high fives, handshakes, or fist bumps, or if people described your character as a color, what would it be? Or just
what kind of food?
Just kind of, yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of random things just to get them thinking, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, even abstract to that point. Well, yeah, just to get them thinking about different things. You know what I mean? Like, wait, I don't even know what kind of food my character likes, let alone what kind of food they would be.
Trail rations? Yeah. Always trail rations 100% of the time?
Or trail rations.
Till they can get an ion stone so they don't have to eat anymore?
Just eggs. Just eggs.
Just eggs.
My character's goal is to never eat again.
So the other bits of session 0, what I want to talk about is some of the social contract thing and the consent pieces or you know, those types of things is like, okay, this is what, let's talk about expectations, like laying out expectations of, okay, these are the types of things that I expect at a table that I'm running, right, as a GM. For me, I want an engagement in role play. Now, do I demand it? No, but I reward it, and I make that clear up front. My inspirations are role play based. Like you min maxing. Not to call
No,
out
that's
your,
cool,
your
man.
podcast,
Ooh.
Hard not to.
no, yeah,
It's the name. It's in the
yeah,
name.
It's in the name.
But you min maxing your character is great. Your reward is your character does badass shit all the time. You know what I mean? Like, but if you're doing role play, and specifically if you're doing role play that's like honest to your character rather than just glorifying them all the time, you're going to get positive feedback from me in the form of inspirations or whatever. And so maybe making some of those expectations clear, talking about, hey, how long are our sessions going to be? What are we agreeing to? What's good for everybody? How long can you go? How long is too long? How long is too short? These types of questions, like some of the just administrative stuff, you want to get out ahead of time before you get caught in the middle of a session, like with a disagreement that's ruining your whole flow. How much do you expect your players to know the rules before they go in? Are you going to help guide them, or do you expect them to know their character sheet up and down? If you're playing in person, what's the system for who brings snacks? All these little things, like you want to take those session zeros to heart and iron some of that stuff out ahead of time, so you're not screwing up your flow and your vibe in the sessions where you're really trying to game. What are some other expectations that y'all have that you would set out at your table?
I think one of the big ones recently, just because I've been GMing for a group of 6, is that everybody has to be okay with us continuing the story if they can't make it. It's something that it's a scheduling thing, and I know it's difficult to get 7 people in a room together.
Yeah.
And so the contract at our table is like, as long as there's 4 more players to play, we're gonna play. Like, we're gonna further the story. If your character is not a part of that session, that's fine. We do recaps at the beginning of everything, but I think that's a symptom of a different expectation to set, which is, this is your game as much as mine. Do you want this to be a role play heavy game? Do you want this to be like for my run through of Fall of Plaguestone? It's goofy. The whole thing is goofy. It's jokey. Characters are made as jokes, and that's the way we're playing it and running it. And guess what? What we wanted to get out of that is learning how to play 2E. It wasn't like,
Absolutely.
oh, I'm really invested in Bort. I'm
Right.
invested
Right.
in.
I really
in
cared about
Town,
Bort.
Entrance
Yeah,
Folly.
yeah.
Like, well, and it wasn't. It also wasn't, hey, I really want to take these characters and plug them into another AP. We'll just make new characters if we want to do an AP. And so
Right.
with that expectation set, we can be silly. We can, people don't have to be there all the time. And I think those are important to set too, because as serious as we all are about our podcasts, these games, these home games can be fun, and they can be loose, and they can be whatever. Like, not everything has to be character voices and all that shit.
Sure.
I
mean,
Yeah.
particularly if it's not a podcast, you shouldn't. I won't say you shouldn't, but it's best not to put that kind of pressure on a group of friends who are just playing to play for fun. Like,
for sure.
you come in it in your own level of comfort. If you want to do a character voice, great, do it. But on the non-pod shows, dude, it's about what you want to bring to the game. My hard rules are mostly about like committing to being there. And as you said, if you can't and it's consistent, we'll just move forward without you, and you can plug in when you want, depending on what game it is. But yeah, when you're not recording, you're supposed to be playing for the sake of playing for fun. You know what I mean? And people have different levels of entry on that. There are people that really play for the gritty combat of it, and I have a couple players in my off-pod games that's what they're about, and I'm not going to fault them for that or take that away. Like, here let's get into it.
Right. I'll cater to that. The combats are going to be fucking hard then. Like, let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
TPK 4PK in Fall of Plaguestone. Let's go. It's
I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, I'm going to come back to it again. That's just part of the social contract. If you figure out what everybody's there to get out of that particular game, then everybody can understand where everybody else is coming from. I mean, one of the things that I always keep at the top of all of my social contracts is we're here to have fun, damn it. Let's not get in the way of each other's fun. Let's find out what's going to be fun for each of us. And, let's figure out what we're expecting out of this. And if you all have those three things down before you even start playing the game, then nobody's surprised by, I mean, in a bad way, surprised by, another person's behavior or anything at a table or, themes that are brought up. It's about laying out all those expectations. Absolutely.
But I think that's a good way to actually circle back to character creation. It's like you have a bunch of players that are coming in potentially with different expectations. I'm not going to tell anyone what to play, but I will certainly guide my role-playing player to, hey, if you have any interest in like a bard or a sorcerer or a paladin, like something that could be
Or
a
an
party phase,
envoy.
yeah, or an envoy, finder, like you're gonna get a lot more opportunities to role play, and that's
Right.
something you like to do. If you want to come in as a barbarian, feel free to come in as a barbarian, but just know that you're probably not going to have the skills to be in that situation. And so either you're going to use one of your 2 skill points in diplomacy as a barbarian, or it's not really going to happen well for you. And same goes with the player that really wants to do the crunch. Okay, you could play a non-charismatic, super optimized wizard. I don't care. That could be fun. You could dive through all the spell lists, and you can nuke my enemies, and you could do all that's fun for you. And you don't have to be a part of the social encounters. It doesn't really matter. You can stand by the side. And I think not telling anybody to play a certain thing, but also saying, hey, these options, I know your play style. These options are really going to suit you if you're on the fence about stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And that goes back to, as a GM, guiding that process from the get-go, which is all about, that's what the session 0 is about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Allard, what kind of expectations do you would you lay out in a session 0? Are we missing something here? Do you have to have a smoking jacket to play with you?
You need a smoking
Necessary.
jacket to play, to get at my
Non-starter.
table, to enter my house even. You must have a smoking jacket.
He's turned me away twice.
Yeah, he keeps showing up with a blazer. No, it's not a smoking jacket. It's not a smoking jacket, sir. It's a blazer.
It's the closest I can find.
You use Amazon. It's your friend. Because I'm trying to think if I threw down any expectations, and I'm not sure if we really talked about it all that much. And I think that I have just tried to, because my experience that I have to talk about right now is just pretty much running it for a podcast. I haven't done an adventure just to have fun.
Well, let's move into that.
while.
Let's talk about our session 0s for a podcast, particularly if there is anything specific to that.
I mean, just besides the things that I had already stated, and we've already talked about, just like it's especially important for a podcast to create a character that is hooked on the thread of the story, or has some element in who they are or what they are or what backstory they have that links into a future point is incredibly important, because that's what makes a character in a contained story something that people get interested to, and just kind of a literary sense of character creation. Like a story wraps around what happens to a character. So
the characters should be the main characters of the story.
And
should not be like just participating in it. You know what I mean?
Unless you're playing Jade Regent.
then
Yeah,
whatever goes.
There's
at
a
that
reason
point.
that is reviewed the way it is.
AP call out.
Yeah.
As I haven't looked in the reviews.
AP call out.
But because So if I were to do a homebrew, I would try to nail out the characters that everyone wants to play, and then like build the story around where they are in the setting that they want to play in. But since yeah, all of us in this situation at least are putting on podcasts, that's the reverse. So there is a setting, there is a plot, there is lore that that there's opportunity for people to go through and discover. It becomes more important to tailor your character to the story if you want to make it through it and have it make sense. And then if you want people to relate to characters going through this story, you better have plot points that are going to keep you invested in the thread that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we didn't talk a whole lot about what we expected to see or things we didn't want to see, and that whole situation. I think that my perspective on it is I I'm just gonna keep testing and poking different kind of morality plays at my characters going through this plot until someone says to back off at this point. I think everyone had at least is of a mindset where they're like, no, nothing that I can think of right now is super triggering and will force me to not enjoy a plot. The heavy kind of stuff, I think that my players are all for the heavy things that could upset people. And I've tried to poke at it, and my whole goal is to make them feel something. So
Right. I'll say that the few specific things that were in our session 0 for STF, for Aeon Throne, the biggest thing I told them is that they have to have connection to Sedona,
Yeah.
that
and that works really well.
Yeah, and so Sedona is like a key person of that adventure, and it was really important that that was the thing that united them. Not only did they have to have a connection to her, but she was the thing that was going to unite them as a group, and that they were going to then transcend her and become their own thing, right? But kind of as her as this inciting incident in this core. And so we really dug in on Sedona. And the other thing we did for Aeon Throne, and really just for us doing a Starfinder podcast, is we, myself, Heath, and John did a lot of starship combat practice, because we had listened to Androids and Aliens at that point, and the starship combat is really difficult to make flow in an entertaining way,
Radio friendly.
I mean, like I actually really enjoy the system, and I think it's developing even further with the new Starship Operations Manual that's out. But like the way, just the flow of it is like, you're basically doing a podcast of a risk turn. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things that are going into decisions that are going to the turn before any action resolves, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to go through this stage, and this is how we're going to fly. And when we fly, we're going to be in this position, and this is how we're going to hit. And so like one of the things that we talked about is we practiced, so we were familiar enough with mechanics to try to get through it, even our first one was a little rough. But like we're going to role play the starship combat. Like we want to call it out as if we're in those positions. The captain's like telling the gunner, like, I'll fire on the enemy or whatever, having that aspect. And so that was another thing that was specific in our pre-campaign discussions, is that's going to be, we're going to really have to dig in on that to sell it, to make it interesting. Yeah. And then of course with Signal Screams, the horror element, and I've already kind of touched on that before. And to your point, Allard, we're good friends. We know each other. We know our own boundaries for the most point. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the most twisted person in our group. So like, that's a player call out.
Player call.
Who is the most twisted?
Yeah.
Find out next time.
Yeah. But we still had the conversation, because none of us really are like huge horror buffs. So I felt like it was warranted to discuss, like, okay, well, how do we all feel about it? I mean, because body horror is a big aspect of Signal of Screams. It's not just psychological horror; it's like straight up body horror. So I wanted to make sure that
Yeah, that was okay.
everybody's good, and like, is there anything that you'll like really get squeamish about and feel uncomfortable and have tension and like literally no.
How do you
Penguins
feel
is what
about
I
a
got.
2-minute description of your teeth falling out?
I'm good. Don't show me a picture of a penguin, please. But yeah,
Penguin with teeth.
Oh no! Oh god! Now you got me. That's my line.
That's why I'm the horror GM. You get this penguin with teeth.
Have you ever had a tooth that was literally just hanging on by like one vein? You could kind of pop it out and put it back in.
Oh boy,
Oh
you've
my
lost.
gosh.
You've lost them.
yeah.
Look, our viewers just got
anyways,
cut in half.
yeah.
Nice.
But that was the specifics for these two campaigns. Did you have any specifics for Extinction Curse, Tyler,
Well,
or Plague Stone for that matter?
Well, for Plague Stone, our session 0 was interesting. It was at the time because we started recording Plague Stone literally the day after second edition dropped. For us, the most important part was we're here to teach ourselves and other people how to play the game. And the other thing that we did was we completely rolled randomly on everybody's ancestry, background, and class.
Wow.
Which is way different than what we've been talking about here, right?
Right, right. That's like a experiment,
It was absolutely an experiment. And one of the things that I think backstories can take place in one of two ways. I think backstories can be an organic thing that occurs on the fly at the table based on the current situation. If you have your backstory as a blank slate, where like a couple of our Plague Stone characters did, we had a chance to, like, at the table be like, okay, and this particular situation was happening, my character has this feeling towards it. Why? Well, how does this sound? And then we would actually hash out that backstory for a couple of minutes, and then we would go back into the description of it, because we had fun building those backstories together as a group while we were playing that game. So that was very different.
That sounds like a fun, like as I said, group experiment. Like if everybody gets on board with it and kind of commits to it,
Yeah.
that could be like a really cool thing. Like especially with Plague Stone, because it's like it's short. So if you get stuck with something you don't like, you can deal with it, and just make the best of it and have
That's
fun
what it
with
was.
it.
Yeah.
Did anybody get like? Was anybody like really not happy with their role?
Spencer, he didn't want to play a champion. He really
No.
didn't. It's not his play style at all.
What
But-
did he have any shift of an opinion after Plague Stone?
It's really funny. I haven't asked him specifically about his shift of opinion when it comes to the champion specifically, because I know Spencer's play style is a Magus. He wants to play Magus characters as often as possible, especially if they have pets. Like he loves like a melee caster with a pet. Some way, somehow. Like Hunter was his favorite class in first edition, by and large.
Right.
But it was really fun to see him take the restriction that he had, being pigeonholed into a particular ancestry background class, and then watching him slowly form his way into role playing that.
Like figuring out who that character was.
Exactly.
You're right,
Exactly.
yeah.
And that was part of building backstories for each other while we were playing. It was
that's
tons of
cool.
fun.
Yeah, I'd do
for-
that. I would do that in a heartbeat. I think that sounds like
for
a
a short
lot of
game,
fun.
right?
I'd go 4 levels.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You go for it.
You got 4
Got me
levels.
for
I'll
I
go
do
4
4.
levels. We'll see
I
how
do
it goes
4.
from there.
True kitty.
We'll have a session 0.5 after 4 levels.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Use
For-
0.6 if that doesn't go well. I don't know.
For Extinction Curse, I'll actually give it to Paizo. Their player's guide for Extinction Curse was so well put together, because you had a non-adversary adversary that's placed in front of you immediately, which is your it's not the BBEG, it's not the primary goal of the campaign, but everybody came from this terrible shithole that was the Celestial Menagerie as, the other circus. So giving everybody a character tie in that way. The one thing I did want is that I wanted to have the characters that came from the Celestial Menagerie know each other and have interacted in a meaningful way while they were in the menagerie together. And for the other two characters actually didn't start in the menagerie, and we had a long conversation about that, which ended up working out for the best, because the two characters that came from outside of the menagerie were tied together. So it ended up being this pair of players and this pair of players were, had separate backstory experiences apart.
They were part of the main circus, though, right? Like, am I remembering that right? The two that weren't part of the menagerie were already working for the Circus of Wayward Wonders.
Yeah,
right?
That's how they joined in. Yep, they were already for the circus before.
So you get the bonus of having a little way to get some exposition out about that, because you have players who know it just because they're part of it, right? And then you also get the lead in from these refugees from the other circus.
Yeah,
that's a great way to just set it up, because I mean that's such a unique experience. Like, you want to buy into that, because that's the whole, like, getting back to it, that's the whole point of the campaign, right? Is we're playing circus members,
I
like,
love my
what if we were superhero circus members? Yeah, let's do that.
Exactly.
I want to do a circus. I have a juggling bard character that I've just wanted to play. I don't know.
Hell yeah. Dude, have you looked at the juggler archetype? It's fantastic.
Yeah, I have.
It's
That's
phenomenal.
why.
Play that
You said
acrobat
I made
too.
one. I made
That
one.
legendary
I
acrobat.
have it ready.
Oh man.
Griffin, what'd you do for specific for the podcast and this one? I mean, you talked a little bit about character creation and really driving the archetypes. And was there anything else about your main story?
Well, you guys know I utilize the corruption mechanics, so everybody had to be okay with that. I said, don't treat your characters preciously. Don't treat your backstories preciously. I'm gonna fuck with them. and
be okay with it.
They've learned to realize that that's true.
Yeah, they've experienced it now.
But I mean, like, I have some players that completely free reign, like, one paragraph backstory, blew it up into something that, I mean, by the same token, I completely changed half of a book of the AP to suit one of my characters. So
yeah,
like I will change both directions at the drop of a hat. That's just the way I'm doing it for a podcast. I think I told you guys on the last one of these that I've storyboarded most of the backstory interaction and all of that stuff. So for me, it was just like, trust me. I have the whole story. Trust me to make the decisions on this and roll with me. And that was the contract, as opposed to, hey, you guys cool with horror? It was like, this is horror. You want to be on the podcast? You got to be a part of the horror. And you got to be okay with your character going insane or getting possessed or whatever.
That's going to happen.
But beyond that, I like the idea of it's actually Eric's listening. He was my first GM ever. And he ran us through a scenario when we first started playing, period. Let us make up characters and just like get our toes wet. For a podcast, I utilized that idea and ran them through Mists of the Mwangi as their characters, as their level 1 characters. I was like, don't worry about, role playing or your character interaction. Let's play a full scenario as your characters at level 1 to understand mechanically how they work and be able to play them so that we can, because I was like, this whole thing, we recorded it. We used it as our like, hey, let's test the recording too and see how we can,
got to do it.
Make sure the audio quality is good, but use that as, hey, now when we play, you have at least some idea of how this fresh character sheet operates, and so you're a little less like Bambi at the start of a fresh podcast.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that was helpful.
Yeah, that's
I would recommend
good
if you
tip.
We
if you're
did
doing
that.
a podcast, do that.
We did
let,
that
let them play their
for-
characters.
We did that to some extent. We didn't go through a whole AP, but I was just like, all right, I'm going to throw at you guys a whole kind of gladiator type situation to figure out the mechanics. But I just kind of mapped out a big kind of town that was empty. And then I started with them all waking up in some sort of like jail cell underground, and then they all found their way to the surface, and then lights flashed, and then things appeared for them to fight. And so we did 2 or 3 sessions of that, one with like they actually lost the fight and got captured, and then we had a role play episode to kind of get our feet wet on the role play stuff before another battle fucked them up, and then we started the AP.
Nice. Well, gosh, guys, I mean, we're getting on our hour here
Yeah, we
of
are.
us talking without prompts from our listeners. Is there anything else you guys want to add to session zeros?
Finish your drinks.
They're a good
What-
idea. They're a good
Yeah,
idea.
do
You should
them.
do them.
Do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. There you go.
I just
Use
had a
these
question.
ideas. Be better than us.
What
Yeah,
about
yeah,
like
for sure.
a session 0 version 2 where you have to have kind of a new session 0 for a new character who's coming in to replace a lost character?
Yes,
Does that
yes.
count as a session 2 or a session 0?
It does to some degree, at least, you know, in the instance of the character or the player and yourself having a little powwow about what is this player character going to be? How are they going to come into the story? You know, those kind of things. Absolutely. And check-in session zeros too. Interjecting them, just I think somebody mentioned it earlier, is on the chat, on the Discord chat, that just regular check-ins, like meeting for a session and spending the first hour checking in. How are you enjoying the story? How are you enjoying your player? Are there aspects of the mechanics that you want to go over? Are there aspects of your player that you want to go over? Are there things happening in your life that we just need to like talk about and sort out? You know, like
Mhm.
I don't think that it's ever a bad time for a conversation like the ones that happen in session zeros. And I think that it's worth making sure you do those regularly, even if you're still in the same campaign, just to kind of regroup.
I'd
Regroup.
definitely
It's always
like
a
to
good idea.
check back in at least with the headspace of the characters, if not like how the player is actually feeling about.
Right. Is there something that you're feeling like you're not getting out of it, you know, that you thought you were, or is there do you have an idea that you just haven't been sure how to bring to the table? Like, let's make a space for that, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
and going off that for a podcast recently, I've reaffirmed to my players that even though like one book might be one character heavy a little bit in terms of bringing out their character's development and stuff like that, I definitely have ideas down the line for your character to have those
Absolutely.
shining moments too.
Absolutely.
And being in a podcast, it's not always the best idea to have everybody's developments happening at the exact same time in the same books and stuff. So it's just like, okay, just trust
Just be
it.
patient, yeah.
I want to bring out your character's stuff too in time. We're just gonna focus at one person at a time or get a little mix in.
Everybody has an arc, damn it.
Yes,
Yeah.
everybody has an arc. We have
Hashtag
to focus.
It's not your
Trust me.
arc yet.
Hashtag not your arc yet.
There's a lot of trust me. That
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of
happens.
trust
There's
me.
a lot of
I
trust
think
me.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
reminders that are necessary of that.
Which I
too.
think is something we all have in common. Like we all are playing with our really good friends, so it's easier to get that trust. I feel like you can't do a session with new people to the game or people that aren't your friends. Like if you're playing at a game shop or something, you can't necessarily go into that and be like, just
Fair.
trust me.
Just
It'll be
trust,
good.
trust
Yeah.
me, random dude.
You'll love it.
Don't
You
peek
know
behind
me.
the curtain. It's gonna be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, good deal, guys. I think it's time. I know I'm out of my beverage.
Yeah, I
You
just
didn't have
chugged
your
mine.
beverage sitting here next to you the
Allard,
whole time.
we'll see you, Allard.
We'll see,
Well,
Allard.
I'll
I'll
see
get a
you.
little more whiskey.
All
Why
right,
not?
I'll see you later. Bye.
Let's
Take it easy.
take a quick 5 and then we'll answer some listener questions. How's that sound?
Sounds like a
Everybody good?
plan.
We'll see
Yeah.
you
All right, y'all
soon.
get your questions in if you haven't. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Get you a fresh drink, and we'll be right back.
Sick.
All right, that looks good. Coming back in 5, 4.
Holy shit! Did my camera get wider? Sorry.
And we're back. Allard, how you doing?
Sorry. My camera got wider.
Yes,
Tripped
it did.
me up.
It did. So I hope you guys all got a fresh drink. We're back to answer some listener questions. We're talking about session zeros. We're having a good time, and Allard is drifting out into wide lens focus. Tyler's keeping his lime game up.
Oh yeah.
Griffin's glowing in the back, still looking sharp. We're here to answer your questions about it. We've got some already pinned. You guys ready? They're not too crazy this time. They're actually good questions. So.
Oh.
Good.
I saw someone commenting about like roll for sex characteristics, and I thought
Yeah, I
it might
didn't-
get
I-
crazy.
Yeah,
You didn't pin that one?
I
You didn't pin that one?
No.
Your guys' AP keep delving into a brothel. Mine does.
Just keep returning to a brothel.
Does every AP have a brothel at the focus of it, or is that just me?
Or does
Yeah.
every town have like a temple that is also like the biggest brothel in town?
That was Carrying Crown. It was like funeral straight to brothel at the wake. Like,
Yeah.
We had to cut a whole
Hard
30-minute
transition.
conversation about how there were no brothels in Aberton, and they were
What?
so disappointed by that.
I bet.
Bet it went for 30 minutes.
Tyler, write a brothel for the town.
They need one. Come on, somebody's got to have the entrepreneurial spirit.
Oh man.
All right. Well, thanks for that setup, fellers. The first question, straight from the brothel, is from Commodore. Tyler, do you specify what kind of women your dude players are allowed to play?
Whew, okay. All right.
Yeah, good luck answering that question.
Yeah.
It's a
all right.
fastball right off the gate.
Go on.
I'll tell you what. Two things about this question. That's first the non-serious answer, which is Ted has a tendency to play sexualized women. He just
Ooh.
enjoys playing highly sexualized women, and that's not the first of those.
It won't be the last.
It won't be the last. 100%.
Player call out.
Yeah, but
Call it.
but on a more serious note, one thing that I really like tabletops for a lot of different reasons, but it's a good way for people to put themselves in somebody else's shoes, right? So where Ted is playing an ex-prostitute in Extinction Curse, and it's not, at least I don't think, in an offensive manner. Other people might have different opinions on that, but that's their opinion. Another one of our players is playing an asexual character, and it gives players the opportunity to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and try to think about the world and the adventure from a perspective that isn't theirs. And I encourage that a lot at my tables. It's one of those things that tabletop RPGs is the rare medium where you get to actively do that.
Yeah.
Right. So not only am I totally okay with Ted's characters, I actually encourage it to a degree. Not all of my players will play, anything that's, way out there or well out of their comfort zone. A few of them play the same types of characters every time they roll something. But that's not a bad thing either. Some people go to tabletop RPGs for comfort. Some people go to tabletop RPGs to, think about the world in a different way. Whatever the case is, that's just something that I like to afford them.
Yeah. Well, that's a great answer to a tough question I threw at you right there off the gate. Good,
Yeah.
nice job. Next question comes from Old Scratch, as he's going now. Scratch a la Johnson Vieux. I have no idea if I butchered that or not, but I'm just going to call him Old Scratch.
Jean Saint-Ville.
Um, he asked, "Is there any way to establish the feel, i.e., horror, funny, etc., you want at the table before the first session without coming across as an overbearing GM?" I mean, I don't think that that's inherently overbearing to do. So I think that that's a good thing. That's the mark of a good GM who can kind of help set the tone prior to going into it. I will say one thing that I've done for the horror, and a lot of it coming from listening to Griffin and what he's doing, is prior to even starting Signal Screams, I've just been talking about it like, oh, you're not gonna like
Set
aspects
the
of this.
mood. Make them
Man.
feel the despair as
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
It's like,
Make them
ooh,
stressed all the time.
I was just rereading this Encounter book 2 the other day. I'm like, oh, I just
Damn.
I don't know what's I don't know what's gonna happen. So those types of things.
Yeah,
and
I
then-
think if I were to do a horror thing, I would just like be very vague about if I think that their character choices are.
Can we just
okay.
stop and talk about VAG for a
Yeah.
second?
Y'all, that could work.
Hey,
That could definitely survive.
that might be
Maybe it could, maybe it wouldn't. No,
Well, I'm sorry, Alec. Go ahead.
that was all I had.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna do a scary, spooky, scary AP, they should know that right off the gate. One thing I would say is like, if I'm really into it, shut the fuck up. Especially for a podcast, just shut the fuck up. I know you like to lighten the mood with your jokes and shit, but half the time they're not funny.
literally had that conversation this week, but it's the thing that you got to learn, right? Because like, I think it's natural for us when tension builds to want to break it.
Oh yeah,
You
you,
know what
want
I mean?
to.
Oh,
Just
100%.
don't do it.
Just
don't do
Shut
it.
up.
Like
don't.
there will be a natural crescendo of the tension, and then it will drop, and then you can make your jokes.
If anything, do it in character. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely make a meta joke as your character. That usually works.
That's the piece.
Just
of-
ask my
That's what I
players.
really want to hear.
That's what I really want to hear.
What about for? I mean, horror is kind of easy to set up some impending dread. I think he asked about funny too. That's something a little bit harder to do prior to the thing. I don't think any of us are running a funny game. I mean,
I'm not funny.
no, I would say that. I mean, we have humor in all of our games,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
would say that. But even Extinction Curse is kind of inherent, like thematically funny.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
And
a
it's
circus,
themed.
so like you want to. There's definitely gags involved.
Yeah.
Like in game, not just in the meta conversation. It's
Right.
not us making jokes. Like your characters are entertainers and comedians to some degree. you know?
And I think that's an interesting, like, having the funny conversation is how do you have that conversation at session 0?
What
I mean,
is
you're
funny for you?
you're a bunch of friends that are sitting around a table at the end of the day fucking around telling a story anyways. How much setup does that truly need?
Well, I think you got to be well versed in your subject matter, right? Like if you're gonna play a Starfinder AP, you can
have to
tell
watch The Expanse.
you can tell your players, like, do you want this to be Guardians of the Galaxy or do you want it to be Inglorious
Right.
Bastards in space? Like this
Right.
could go either way. Like how do you, like, especially if that's a home game, how do you want to do this? Do you want to use, I mean, honestly, with mine, do you want to use Scooby-Doo Or do you want to do you want this to be a Scooby-Doo adventure, or do you want this to be like a House on Haunted Hill or something?
It's
Like,
actually
Mhm.
it's really
Fair.
interesting. I just messaged Griff about this recently. I'm going to be running an all on the table from one of my Patreons, and we were discussing themes, and he specifically said that he wanted a comedy theme in the realm of 2.5 Men.
Yeah.
And that's a super specific
very
So
specific.
theme and style for a game. But Allard and Griff hopefully will be with us on that one, just for you, Blart.
Yeah.
But
Slump.
yeah, Slump's gonna get some fun there, and we'll write that later, and you guys get a chance to check it out. But there are definitely, like you said, there's different horror themes, there's different comedy themes. I mean, where else do you go aside from that? When it comes to a tabletop game.
I think Griff hit it, is that you can set them up with inspirational media, right? Like, I know you guys, Griff, you guys watch a couple movies before every book to get in vibe with the movie. And before we started Signal Screams, I recommended some books and some movies to my crew, much, from that. And, when we started Against the Iron Throne, I was like, dude, this is a space Western, like, brush up, everybody was like, oh, Firefly, like, and everybody went and brushed up on Firefly. And then as The Expanse became much more like, I don't know, awesome, I was like, let's just like, everybody should watch that, because like their starship combat, the way that it goes in there is really kind of how I want to visualize it anyways, for us, and so yeah, like you can use those types of things ahead of the game, just relate them to similar stories or similar vibes to get them in the headspace for it. All right, let's go to the next question.
I was trying to think if there was any media I could point my players to, but I couldn't think of anything.
In Bruges.
What?
Oh, dude, I'll recommend
What?
In Bruges to anybody and everybody.
In Bruges?
In
Yeah,
Bruges,
man. Yeah.
Allard, we're gonna start a list, man. We're gonna
You
start a
start me
list.
that list. Type it out, because I don't know how to spell that.
It's about two like gangsters who go hiding in this old Belgian town, and like
Okay.
the shit comes to them anyway. Like it's awesome. It's an awesome movie. Check it out. Super good.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, there's
send me
all
those
sorts of
letters.
there's all sorts of things that any kind of Peaky Blinders, I would say, definitely fits the opening vibes of book one.
Yeah.
Like just getting in,
that's a good call.
just getting in that kind of like English gangland feel.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose English gangland.
Yeah,
Gangs
man,
in New
do it.
York, I think would be a good
I
one
was just
too.
about to say Gangs
Yeah.
in New York.
I love
yeah,
Gangs
that's a
in
great
New
one.
York.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll think about that more for my upcoming books.
See, listeners, you guys are helping us too.
Yeah.
This is a two-way street. Next question, we're gonna go here to Commodore again. Ask, how much do you enforce party balance? 4 rogues and a swashbuckler, okay?
Home game, not at all.
Yeah,
Podcasts, I mean, like it's your fucking problem if you don't have X, Y, or Z, right?
Right.
I don't care. I'll
Right.
kill you either way.
Yeah.
But podcast game, I think, I actually really like some advice I got from the Find the Path folks when we met them at PaizoCon 2 years ago now. But if your group picks roles for an adventure, I like the idea that, especially in a podcast, they maintain that role.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be the healer, if you drop out and you're the only one that dies, you should probably be coming back as a healer, unless the party has some other glaring gap. And I say that because you came into the game with a certain party balance and a certain expectation of what you have to work with. I'm fine if you want to go cleric to oracle, or even cleric to inquisitor or something, cleric to paladin, but be able to heal, be able to use divine spells, because your party's counting on that. And for a podcast, if you coming back as another fighter causes the collapse of the rest of the party, that's going to suck. And that's kind of on you. So that, I mean, that's my advice. I tell it to, you know, obviously we've had a death and followed that philosophy on our podcast. I think if there's multiple deaths, that's completely off the table. It's like, just come back as other stuff then. But if it's a 1-for-1, you really got to just keep being whatever you were for the party.
Yeah, or at least think about it in a sense where you're facilitating maybe the next book or the next part of the story in a way.
Like I can't. Yeah. Okay. So I'm more aligned with that, Allard. That you got to make a character for what's going on in the story now. So
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
You know, like more so than filling your current role. But and that's just my personal taste. Like if that character dies, I don't want that character 2.0. Like
Fair.
Yeah.
In like any form or fashion. You know,
So-and-so's twin sibling comes back to avenge their death.
gosh,
Right. But
like,
I also think that's, I mean, right now a shortcoming of Starfinder. It's like you don't have the glut of classes as Pathfinder. Like I could come as I could do 20 different builds of 6 different classes and be a healer that works dynamically differently than the previous character if I wanted to come back as a healer in Pathfinder 1E.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of ways you can be a healer, right, in 1E without being, as you're saying, that's what you're saying. But also with Starfinder, I don't think those roles are as clearly defined either.
Yeah,
I would
You
agree.
know what I mean? Like, you can be a hardcore tank, you can be a hardcore healer, but I don't think it's as necessary to the balance of the Starfinder game as it is in 1E and potentially 2E. Although I do feel like 2E is really pretty balanced, because you can dip, no matter what your class is, you can dip into skills from other places if you need to fill that. But like for me, like particularly for the podcast, is if your character dies, I want a new interesting character that's like it's like a new wrinkle for the party. Like you know, like I want something that's going to shake up the party, you know, like specifically change the dynamic, because that person died, you know, and they depended on them and they lost that person. They're going to get a new person that's
let them feel the loss. You don't want to fulfill that sense of loss right away.
So you're saying you don't want that shift in dependency. You want a whole new party dynamic because it is a whole.
I want them to, it's a new puzzle for them to solve. In my mind, it's like, okay, we got to rethink our tactics because we have a different role here. You know, we have a different, you know, we also had a death and a replacement. We can't talk about it too much, but like that replacement is very different, you know. But to your point, Griffin, it does cover a lot of the same space.
Where I'm coming from is that I think if certain characters died, you would change your tune. If your party's only healer died, which I'm not saying that you only have one because you have a stamina and a health healer, but if you only had one and they died, the party is fundamentally flawed unless you have another healer. When you have somebody that does the same DPS and generally does DPS as 4 of the other characters, then come back as something else that has skills too, and you're good, right?
Right.
I mean, it's the same concept. I think the healer is probably the highest thing on everybody's list, but there's also shit like, say you have an archer and no one else in the party has any range capabilities. If you come in as something without any range capabilities,
you're definitely
be in
the
trouble.
party. Yeah, you're
putting it. Fuck you, buddy.
Yeah, and coming from a podcast that has 3 characters instead of 4 or 5, I think I if I remember correctly, I was kind of harping at the balance of everything right away. Like we have 2 hybrid classes and then just a straight up caster. So we needed somebody to be up front, somebody that could potentially heal, and one person fulfilled both those roles. We have a person fulfilling the kind of caster role, and then we have another character kind of filling up the secondary attack and then also the skill monkey role, and then being able to bring in an NPC to help fill out their ranks is something that worked for us a bit.
Yeah, I would say just a cap mine for the podcast stuff. There are roles that are more important than other roles
You're
in
right.
in backfilling.
You're right.
And something like a healer is very important. You can be that party in any edition. That just depends on the wand, or in Starfinder depends on that stamina healing to keep them out of the health, or in 2E uses one of the now 60 archetypes to
Right.
kind of make a you
Seriously,
could make
man.
a cleric that's also a dope archer, or make a
Right.
cleric that's a 2-weapon fighter. You can make fucking any concept with the
You
APG.
You just got to have some healing, or else,
but like some
'cause
of
the game's
that,
built around that, right? Like you
Yeah.
have to have some healing.
Yeah.
a lot of
combat
the
healing.
adventures are built on the classic Trinity, whether we like it or not. And so you lose your tank. Okay, maybe you're all ranged fighters and you can learn to cope, but you lose your healer.
Hard, yeah.
I hope your
So-
party already bought a bunch of wands and wasn't depending on the healer to do shit beforehand.
So I'm gonna kind of throw another Adam style wrench in this. I enjoy parties with holes, because it's interesting to watch from my perspective. It's interesting to watch a group of people overcome glaring team composition holes with creative solutions.
That's fair.
Now, to be honest with you, my group naturally builds a composed, synergistic team. That's just what they do. That's part of how they play.
Well,
So-
that's the type of characters each of them like to play, right?
Exactly.
It just kind of sets up a balance,
Yeah, I mean, that's literally what we do. It's the min-max thing. So, and it's even still, there are so many different roles to fill in a party. Like, you can talk about your Trinity, right? But sometimes you don't recognize how much a game changes when a new player, or a character death occurs, and then a new character is introduced that has 8 more languages than the rest of the party, and suddenly they're understanding Aklo or the crazy off the wall languages, where when I'm as a DM describing, you hear some mumblings in the background, but you don't quite understand it, turns into, okay, you hear, 2 things in Undercommon talking about, the card game they're playing, or whatever the case is.
Or a plot point.
Or plot points. There are
Plot
holes.
points.
There are holes that exist even in a balanced team that aren't obvious until somebody comes in and fills those holes.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say even with a party of 5, there's holes. People just
Yeah.
make characters that either step on each other's toes, or it's just that it's the nature of what people want to play. And I never want to be like, hey, don't play what you want to play. But for a podcast, hey, you clearly wanted to play that for 6 levels,
That's
and
true.
now, like, do you really want to like pivot so hard that it it creates this vacuum? You can do that, but I'm not actively trying to TPK my group in a podcast necessarily. I don't really want to go through okay, our story fell flat, and now nobody likes the new characters, and there's an adjustment period. Like, if I don't have to do that because you could come back as something that could heal them, I'd rather you do that.
Right.
I mean, if I TPK you, I TPK you, but at least you had a healer that could possibly do something about it.
Yeah, I think the key there is being like, okay, don't come back as another cleric of Erastil or whatever.
Right. Like, don't be the same exact
change
thing.
the flavor up, as long as you're being different in how you go about it, but still being able to keep people alive. That's a cool thing.
Yep.
Right. I mean, you could be a fucking witch for all I
Yeah.
care. Be a hedge witch.
You
Yeah.
could be a witch. You.
I'm gonna be an alchemist that uses positive energy bombs.
There you go.
Okay.
Boom.
Well, look, that was a good question. Good spicy question. I like it. Let's move on to another one. This one comes from Bipolar Pop Tart and all his
Of course,
aliases.
What's up, BP?
And we kind of talked about this before, but let's just kind of touch on it a little bit again. do you guys regularly have session zero style meetings throughout a campaign to make sure everyone is on the same page when it comes to expectations and things like that? I mean, I already suggested that's some advice that I would give. And I mean, I know that we do, absolutely.
Yeah, in ours, I've made it a point a few times just to in podcast be like, all right, it's been 10, been 20, it's been 2 books. What are the characters thinking at this point right
Yeah,
now?
character check-ins are just as important,
And I think that's at least interesting and helps flesh out what's been happening for an audience.
Well, it's good for your
Wow.
players too, like in the sense that it makes them kind of organize all the information that they've gotten in the last 10 to 20 episodes or sessions or whatever it is just like, hey, we've just kind of been barreling through this. Let's take stock of like,
Yeah,
what do you know what's going on? Like, let's make sure that we understand what our motivation and purpose here is, and what are your characters feeling about these things. They just have experienced like 7 near-death experiences in a row. Like, maybe we should just
every other
process
day
that for a second.
Yeah, let's take a step back, y'all.
Yeah, like,
It's also good role play time. I mean, that's
Right.
perfect role play time, right?
You set that up
true.
to give them that space to breathe as characters, and for you to breathe as a GM. Like, just to all the GMs out there, give yourself a break and turn it over to your players and say, hey, how are your players feeling about the last 7 encounters I just threw at you? Go pop a beer and like, you got a good 20,
Back.
30 minutes break there,
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
Fingers
hopefully.
crossed.
Yeah, that's what you're hoping for. I guess if you
I
don't,
got
there's
10
some
minutes
other,
out of the
other
last
things to address. All right. So yeah, we pretty much covered that already. A really good question here from the Welfare Store. As GMs, what advice would you give a player who wants to become better at effectively RPing a character that is different from the player as a person?
Man, that's a great
That's
question.
a fantastic question.
Well, for me, like the first thing that comes to mind for me is, like I kind of mentioned it a little bit before, the tabletop RPGs give a unique opportunity to place yourself in somebody else's shoes. And the best thing I think that a game master can do to help that process is to, I'm going to kind of go way back to the beginning here with something that Allard did, is ask questions to not the player, but to that character about just random shit, high five, handshake, or fist bump. I love that one, by the way. If your character came across this particular situation, how would they react? And why would they react that way? One of the best tools that we have as game masters is the question. Like having that ability to ask not just the obvious questions, but to ask the hard questions, because there are things that we may know more in regards to how different players play, depending on your experience, right? And to how different players play different characters, to kind of challenge their preconceived notions on how a certain archetype of person would act in a situation, just to ask that question and turn it into a conversation. As far as outside of having a conversation with your game master, watch and read media that makes you uncomfortable. I know that's going to sound kind of odd, but there are certain situations that I think every person in their own personality finds innately uncomfortable, because if they try to imagine themselves in that person's situation, they would go, I would never do that. Why in the hell would somebody ever want to say or do these things? I think for me, the most obvious example is Michael Scott from The Office. Why in the hell is that character so obviously obtuse? You know, not just the fact that he says stupid shit or says very self-centered things or cares about himself so much, but why would that kind of character do that?
Uh,
Yeah.
Being able to explore the different side of perception just by first making the choice to go contrary to what you yourself would do just opens up a whole little rabbit's hole of thought, and hopefully a GM or the player can kind of bounce off that and help that kind of whole thought experiment further and develop, instead of shutting it off because it's not something that they're comfortable with. Being able to explore what you're not comfortable with is kind of the whole key to playing a character that's different from what you are.
I think one way you can do it to help yourself compartmentalize a little bit is that I know that it's like a trend to, I'm going to play a character, I'm going to do a character voice. That's how I'm going to be my character. And if you're comfortable with that, fine. But if you're really trying to understand motivations that are opposite of who you are as a person, I'd suggest that you describe your character's actions from a third person perspective. Say, Joe is going to go up to this guard and he's going to spit in his face, rather than you saying, I am going to go up there, or my character is going to go up there. Give yourself an opportunity to actually detach from the character a little bit if it's so far different from you. And use that third person description to distance yourself from them, and then allow yourself the freedom to kind of explore what that character is capable of and what they're going to do, you know. And then once you've kind of broken through that, you can shift back into inhabiting that character from the first person, because you've kind of trained your brain to separate the two, you know.
Yeah, I've definitely thought on the difference between describing your player's actions as an I statement versus a third person statement as they go and do this thing, and how that separates how you think about your character's actions. Is it harder to break away from your own tendencies when you declare what you're going to do in I statements? Or is it easier to delve into the third person and live out a separate fantasy and things like that? It's just kind of an interesting thinking point.
Yeah, I think that helps, you know, the kind of baseline psychology of that, of the power of words and how you're describing a situation, for sure.
Definitely.
I mean, we tend to utilize, when we create a character, we tend to utilize examples whether we think we are or not. So I think to Tyler's point, like when you're consuming media that makes you uncomfortable, like generally when you create a character, you think of certain archetypes or people in media or people in stories that are like that character. So explore those things. Generally, even if you didn't plan your character to be like someone in media, you can find a media analog to your character and you can see how that kind of plays out. And I think that's helpful in role playing it, is seeing it done already, seeing an example there for you. Not that you have to follow that exactly, but you can take cues from that. Like say you are creating an evil character, you can look at hundreds of villain archetypes to build that character. You can look at hundreds of villains. You can look at a Joker. Maybe you want your character to be like the Joker. Maybe you want your character to operate like the Penguin and scare the shit out of Adams players. Like, you know, and by using examples to create that character that's opposite of you, you find good examples and almost idols for your character, things that you should explore to build that character up. And maybe it's a blend of different things, but it's helpful to have the separate archetypes there to blend together. And I think that's important, just as from even if it's not an opposite character, it's important at character conception to know that, oh, hey, I'm definitely basing this character off of this, or I'm really trying not to base this character off of this, and this.
Mm.
You could take cues from the media you consume and make yourself better at role playing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And communication, right? Communication with your GM. Say, hey, listen, this is the kind of concept I have for this character, but I'm a little anxious about going all in on this, or I don't really know how to go all in on this. I promise the more information you give your GM, the more that the game is going to be catered to you, you know, and what you want out of it. Like a GM can't work with something that they don't know, you know.
I will
like,
say, oh, go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
oh, go
I want to
ahead.
cut you off here.
No, go ahead.
I will say, and as a GM, but as a player in a lot of campaigns, sometimes the playing off type is more an exercise in getting comfortable, and you know how to do it. You're just not comfortable with doing it. And so my trick whenever I play a character that isn't like me is I give them a quirk or a tick that I use as a crutch to make myself more comfortable with that character. It's something that I just centralize on that character. Maybe it's like, you know, they often end their sentences in questions. And so the character comes off as very unsure. And that's something that I then use and evolve into the role play of something that maybe I'm not comfortable with. And I think that's just a helpful, it's a cheap technique, but it's helpful to get comfortable with something if your main barrier is that you're not really comfortable with it.
Yeah, it helps ground them in something that you are comfortable in.
Exactly.
Or like if you're going to do a character that's completely different from you are, maybe find one trait that you would share in common with them, and then that can help you bring them into that character a little bit easier.
That's a good point. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to go about it. The main thing is you got to trust yourself a little bit with it, and just go for it. You know what I mean? Like at some point you just got to take the step and fall into it and see where it goes, and be okay, and be like okay with it not landing how you envisioned. Like none of us, it is not a requirement to be a professional actor to play these games. It's not like, despite all of like what we do as podcasts and Critical Role and all those kind of things that like really glorify our hobby, like you do not have to be an actor to play this game, and don't let anybody fucking tell you that. No GM should tell you that. No fellow player should tell you that it's a requirement for you to be a voice actor and like to fully understand your character to play this game. You know? Also,
along those same lines, and I hate to take this one from you here real quick, but don't expect that from the other people at your table either. Don't expect that your GM's going to be Matt Mercer. You know.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Don't expect that the players are going to be Matt Mercer's players, like the Critical Role players. I mean, you know, I see it all the time in subreddits. You know that, like, I'm upset because my players want me to be exactly like so and so GM from popular media, but it goes both ways. Just don't expect that from each other. You're at a table to have fun. Just have fun, damn it. That's all.
Being able to play against type is a part of the contract that we talked about for session 0. It's a comfort level that should be established with the GM and with the other players at the table. If you want to play against type and you want to really go for it and you feel like you failed, you didn't fail. No one at the table is there to judge you. That's a part of the social contract. That's a part of being comfortable and role playing together. If you know, I understand like playing a society scenario and whatever with a bunch of strangers, but that's not where I would suggest playing against type necessarily.
Yeah,
like
right.
I would suggest doing it with your friends, or I would suggest bringing it in as the backup character in a campaign you're maybe playing with new people. And as you get comfortable with them, then it's like, hey, it's okay for me to experiment and for me to try these things. And part of the contract at the table is that you're not going to judge me for this. That's I mean, as long as you're not being like fucking ridiculous or going against other pieces of the contract, but you're not going to judge me for this. I'm exploring something. And I think that's important to keep in mind. Like, no, if you're comfortable at your table already, no one at your table is gonna like call you out for goofing up or
Right.
nothing. When you feel like something fell flat, it didn't necessarily fall flat. Maybe it felt like that to you, but that's not necessarily how the rest of your table felt.
Yeah, like even for GMs, like I'm just trying to throw things out there and see how it all plays out. I'm not always going for complete control. I'm going in to see how other people react to the situations that I've thought of, to see if
It's
there are different ways
improvisation.
to approach it.
Improv.
It's improv, dude. Like improv does not always land. We all know this. It's okay. It's the point of it is to do. That's like the point of it.
To do and try.
Do it. Yeah,
Guys,
right.
we made
If you're at a table, roll with it. If you're on a podcast, edit it out.
Yeah, there you go.
There it is. There it is.
Guys, we made
That's
it 2
right.
hours into a GM happy hour before we brought up improv.
Wow. That
Wow.
was
I know.
new record.
It's a new
What
record.
was our other records?
Dude, I don't know, like at least
45
a dozen-
seconds
Yeah, a
last
dozen
time.
times.
All right,
okay.
you gotta improv. Yes, and all right.
Yeah.
And
We'll
say
do the
no,
episode.
but
We'll
I'm
do
gonna
the
kill you.
episode on that. We will. But we got one more question, and then I think it's gonna be last call.
All right.
This is coming from Josh from
What's up, Josh?
SGF. Yep. He asked, as someone who is scared of the idea of GMing a game, why do you GM, and what makes it rewarding for you? Okay, that's broad. We'll keep it reined in on that part of it. But also, why should I GM? So I'd like to focus more on that, and like, why should anybody GM if they're afraid to? What do you say to somebody who's wanting to take the plunge but nervous to?
It's a good question.
That's a good question.
I mean, I'll hop in. I'm very curious to hear Tyler's answer to this, since he's the most long term and probably most consistent. But there's a satisfaction you get in facilitating not only your own fun but your friends' fun. That just is really enjoyable to me as a GM. I think if you enjoy playing a lot of characters, if you enjoy actually being the arbiter of the entire story, if you have a story to tell, you should GM. Not that you don't have a story to tell as a player, or as a character, but you have so much more to tell as the GM. You're facilitating all of your friends' cumulative story, and you're making it into something cohesive and fun and something that, like, I don't think there's anything more satisfying than getting your friends calling back to 2 years ago when something happened in one of your campaigns, something that you ran that was just like bonkers, or was such a good character moment that you facilitated, or was a twist that nobody expected. Like, that's just a feeling. It feels really good. And when you start doing it, and especially if you start doing it with people that you're comfortable with, like, I mean, everybody screws up as a GM. I still screw up. You all still screw up. It's a thing.
Screwed up.
It's a thing we do.
Last week.
Yeah, man.
Right. and so it's like if you could be doing it for years and years and not be perfect, then nobody expects you to be perfect when you first start, especially. Right. And you have, and I know I'm talking at Josh's question here, but he has a great support group of friends, as do any of our players if they wanted to start GMing. But hopefully, if you want to start GMing, you have a group of good friends you want to GM for. That just makes it even easier. Even if you don't, you should start GMing, because, I mean, the kind of people that would be a dick to you for screwing something up aren't the kind of people you'd want at your table anyway. So you're the GM, so you can just be like, Scoot, You're out of here. And anybody that's left is a cool person and somebody that you would actually want a GM for anyway. So you shouldn't be stressed about it, because it's not. I mean, it is stressful at times when you're, especially when you're one of the four of us and kind of making stuff for other people to listen to. But
Mhm.
when you're just in your home game, it's like your buds are gonna love what you put out. It's
Mhm.
not. I mean, you're doing them probably the greatest service ever by running a game for them so they get to play in it, and you're gonna feel all of these good feels from all the stuff I just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, because that stuff just happens. Like, like none of us went to school to become writers. None of us have film degrees. You know what I mean? Like, none of us are. I think had the intention when we were getting educated to be podcast runners. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you just do it because it's fun. Like, and so GMing gives you the opportunity to, like, it's almost freeing in a sense, because you don't have a single character that you have to make sure stays, like, keeps this arc that's persistent through 20 levels. You know what I mean? And you got to know this one person inside and out, and you got to know every motivation that they have. Like, as a GM, dude, most of the time you're just freewheeling with the NPCs. Like,
This
who
guy
the,
was mentioned 2 times, and I got 2
yeah,
sentences
like,
about
yeah,
him.
Yeah.
it's like,
Just
it's
build
like,
up. Improv.
yeah. So, like, to some
Improv.
degree, yeah, here we go. Yeah, you get to play that way, and it's fun. And, like, to just bounce off of Griffin, any if you're a GM, or if you're somebody who's interested in GMing but nervous, it's likely because you're playing for somebody and in a group that's fun, and you have this notion of, be like, well, I wonder what it would be like to be the one running the story. If you have that wondering, then do it. You know what I mean? Like, that's all you need. That is literally the only thing you need to GM, is the curiosity to try.
Yeah.
That's
Especially
how
if you
all of us
switch.
started GMing. Like,
Yeah.
If you
seriously.
switch in a group that already has a GM, that GM is going to be so goddamn happy they get to play.
They're gonna help you the whole
They're going to
time.
make you the best GM ever.
Yeah, they're gonna help
the
you
fuck out of you
the whole time. Yeah.
they're gonna be your rules dude. They're gonna be like, oh well,
They'll get on your
talk
nerves
to you
at
after.
times.
They'll be like, hey, this is maybe how how I might have done it if you want to, like,
Yeah, no,
talk strategy.
that part will get on your nerves, and that's just gonna happen. But you'll have a safety net. You'll have a support group there of somebody who's like, yeah, we can get you through the rules part, man. Just let's have fun playing the game. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you on this aspect of the just mechanics. We can get through that together with, like, no big deal, and then, like, I'm here to play what you're telling me. You know what I mean? Like, let's do it.
Yeah, and I think for me, the difference between playing and GMing is, if I'm playing, I have an idea that I want to have tested or to, like, see through. And if I'm GMing, I kind of want to observe other people's perspectives at different situations. Like, I want to be tested in some belief by somebody else's belief, and I want to see how that all intermingles in a way. Where if I'm playing, I want to be the advocate in what message is being brought out. Where if I'm GMing, I want to see what messages get brought to the forefront.
Yeah. I'm gonna answer Josh's questions backwards. First of all, Josh, you should absolutely 100% pick up a module and run it for the Southern Tomfoolery group, because we all want to see that. We all want to hear that. Do it. But as far as, like, why IGM, I think a lot of it comes in, like, when I started, I was the guy willing to do it, is how it started for me. And it's, why should you as a player GM? I think everybody who is a player should at some point GM. And I think that GMing as a longtime player, even if it's for a short module or just a one shot or whatever the case is putting yourself in that other person's shoes makes a huge difference in how you play the game moving forward.
Yeah, you'll be a better player.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt.
Completely changed the way I played.
Yeah,
Longtime player into GM.
You will
completely-
understand the game on a whole different level, and you can. It's just parts of it will become effortless, and it's nice. It's nice,
Yeah, and you can start picking up on the elements that are appropriate to pick up on and follow through with a little bit more easily.
And I mean, like, as far as like for me, what I enjoy the most about GMing is that part of this just goes to my own personality. I'm a host. I like hosting. I don't know if facilitating other people's fun is the right word for it. But I like creating spaces that other people can play around in, whether it's a story or small interactions with people. I think that on a very surface level, my favorite part about GMing is I love practicing character voices, and I love just trying crazy character voices.
My dude.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I mean, it's one of those things where if you get a chance to try everything, you then start to understand what you really like about media, even, or just about playing games at a table. And on a more personal level, if you're playing with friends, it actually really helps you to understand your friends more as people.
100
Yeah,
right there.
I mean, there's just one thing that being the GM, like I said, it started off for me just being the only guy willing to fucking do it when I was a teenager. But it actually actively brought me closer to the people I cared about. And there's nothing more rewarding than like creating connections and interpersonal connections with people. That's part of the reason why I invite everybody and their mom to come play all on the table with me, because I love facilitating that, and it's a great way to get to know people. And it's a great way to interact with somebody, on a to an extent, a superficial level. I mean, you're superficially telling stories to each other. I'm the superficial adversary to your player, and, I'm the superficial counterpoint to your story point. But at the end of the day, we all learn things about each other that way. And it's fulfilling and it's satisfying.
So that's why you should GM.
Yeah.
Plus, if you're one of those players that can't stop making characters, you're gonna get to play every fucking class as a GM,
Absolutely,
baby.
man.
If you think that creating characters is just a fun pastime, you'll probably like GMing.
You're gonna be right in there. Oh, you got all the.
You already have at least read on every single rule that can touch every single ability, so you might as well GM.
Right.
Well, fellas,
Is
one
this
more
it?
question.
One
We got
more?
One more.
Okay.
We can do it. You know what? We're honestly half an hour under last time's time.
Wow.
Let's
we're,
do one
killing
more.
it.
Let's
We can do
treat
one
the
more.
We'll
people.
do one more.
Yeah, we've had some really good questions tonight, so I feel like they've earned an extra.
Let's
a
do
little,
it.
a little extra
You guys
question.
have been
You're in
great.
the panache state, gang.
Yeah.
Take
Take
Oh,
a hero
you.
point.
Yeah, get in that
yeah.
panache state. You can do some precision damage now.
Okay. So bipolar Pop Tart again. He asks, "How do you recover from a session 0 that showed you the players weren't exactly into the story you were wanting to tell? Do you adjust, but try to keep to your roots, or scrap it all?"
I think for mine, it was a little bit more adjusting how I'm going to start out the story. I know that my first one, my example here is to do a podcast for, and I knew that I had foregone the ability to kind of free reign create my own story for the added benefit of having a story to follow through an extended period of time.
Preach.
And I think that when my characters, my players presented ideas that were a little bit different to what I expected, I definitely shifted to try to bring them more into the story.
All right, good. That was a good, concise answer, Allard.
I like that.
Take a drink.
Oh,
Yeah.
take an inspiration and a drink.
Yeah, yeah.
Ooh, bam, draw a hero card, baby.
Get
man.
them all. Hero point too, right?
I only had a little drop, so I'll add a little more.
Yeah.
I would say as an answer to this one, like generally before session 0, I would hope that you would frame up a couple of options. That's what or have a group of 20 people you might want to play with and see who's interested, because yeah, I mean, not everybody's going to be interested in what you maybe is your first choice to GM, but if you have 3 choices that are a little bit different, then you can pose it to the group and see what the group enjoys, and then your session 0 can go smoothly. If if session 0 feels like it falls completely flat, I mean, either get busy changing or get busy writing, baby.
Well, I mean, it's session 0, so you shouldn't be that far in. At session 0.
Exactly. It's like
you-
why would you?
Available to change.
I don't know why
Well,
you wouldn't cut your
or-
losses at that point if nobody's interested in playing a
Right.
pirate campaign and you propose Skulls and Shackles. Like I don't know why you wouldn't just
What
be
are
like,
you all even doing here?
Come
yeah,
on, you
what's the
guys.
point? What's the point?
Yeah,
Why
like-
didn't you key on like Hell's Vengeance or fucking Curse of the Crimson Throne that I also
Why are you doing
suggested?
evil full plate wear?
I think that bipolar, what often happens more regularly is that everybody is in agreement at session 0, and then you get into it and it becomes something that a number of people at the table it didn't turn out like they wanted. You know what I mean? Like, and that does happen, and it could be at no fault of like the players or the GM or anything. It's just like a module that didn't deliver in how you thought it was going to. We've run STF through a couple modules that we didn't finish, and like as a GM, that's like fucking hard, like because we're close to finishing both, but like we just didn't, because it's just the climax of it isn't gonna be really worth it. Like we didn't earn it.
It's a
To some
story
degree.
that nobody.
It just
fully
never clicked. It never
cares.
clicked. And like, it's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay if that happens. And even then you should be kind of okay with cutting your losses and move into something else. Now, if you're in a podcasting situation, obviously that's you got to figure out how to make it work, and
That's a
you
different
gotta-
story, man.
you gotta
but
say
like-
book 5 gets better, dude. Fucking Group Barrett.
right.
Deal
Right.
with it.
It's okay to write out characters from a story. I don't know.
Yeah, like seriously, like if you're get to a point to where you just do not like your character and you're like, I don't want to do another 5 books with this character. Okay, talk to your GM, figure it out, or if like the whole table is like, I am not feeling this adventure, like we're just checking boxes every time we come here and play, like it's like, okay, here's the next encounter, here's the dice rolls we're supposed to do. Like that can happen, and it's okay. Like that's why you need to have the check-in sessions to say,
Yes.
hey, are we enjoying this or not? Like if we're not, let's stop wasting our Saturday mornings with this, and let's do it with something
Are we
that we
as
wanna
friends
play.
trying to have fun and create a story that we're all invested in, or are we just getting together to play something and be together?
Now,
One thing I will
what do
say
you-
about Paizo adventures specifically, if you're looking to GM one of those, and I know, if you're in this chat and you're listening on YouTube, you're probably interested in Paizo products, especially the Pathfinder stuff, because I know Starfinder doesn't have it. Like, you as the GM need to vet that player's guide. You need to make it sure everybody reads it, but you need to fucking vet it, because sometimes those things have glaring gaps. And
Yes.
like, I mean, sometimes it's like, hey, this is that for 2 books, and then it's none of that exists anymore. And you need to then give your players the, hey, listen, I know you all read the player's guide. It's like that for 2 books, and then it turns into this. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because so then you don't run into that situation on book 3 or on book 4 or whatever. You don't run into the, hey, this has actually become a drag. Because honestly, what you could do is find a cool module of appropriate level and say, well, is this more your style? Sub that in for the book. Sub that in for that module. So like, finagle it a little bit, but get it to work, or just homebrew for that book, right?
Yeah,
but
don't be afraid to rewrite.
Yeah, don't be afraid to
a lot of
change it.
Paizo things have been like a red herring book 1 that actually gets you into the real book 2 or book 3.
That's shitty, because so much of the players' guides for all of the APs are written off of like how book 1 is, and then
it's like not that anymore
completely changes
exactly
so fast.
So I think you owe it to your players to have read the players' guide if you're going to make them read it, and be like, hey, this is how it differs. I've read the whole thing. I know where this goes. Is that cool? If it's not, then what parts of that aren't cool? Here's kind of the, I like to give like the skeleton of it, even like, I'm not trying to give like, oh, here's plot hooks or anything, but like, hey, you're gonna like, this part's gonna be like a city adventure, and then you're gonna go out to the mountains for 2 books, and then you're gonna, and it's gonna be like wilderness survival, and then it's gonna be this, and then they can decide like, okay, well, here's the parts of that I like, and here's the parts I don't like, and you can get a consensus.
So I'm gonna a lot of your guys' answers, although great answers, are a lot about playing at tables with your friends, and there are a lot of people out there who are looking to get into the hobby who don't have friends that want to play the hobby. They're going to the LFG boards on Roll20 or in Fantasy Grounds, and what happens when your session 0 falls flat? 2 things. If you're willing to scrap what you originally had in mind, because the players that you had a session 0 with obviously seem to be leaning towards something else that you're aware is a thing, right? Like if you're playing Iron Gods, for example, in Pathfinder, which is like this steampunky adventure, and you get the very distinct idea that everybody wants to play a fucking pirate, then hey guys, we're gonna switch gears and we're gonna go play Skulls and Shackles now, right? Because I'm getting that vibe off of you. But if you're doing a session 0 and 3 out of 4 of your players are hard, full on into what you're putting forward, and there's a 4th person who just is not willing to play suit, this is a hard conversation to have. But it's worth having this conversation. Maybe you should go find another table to play with. That's a hard thing to say to somebody else, but when it's somebody that's not, like, you're not playing with immediate friends, you're playing with random people online or whatever the case may be, sometimes it's okay to say, hey, my table just isn't for you. Maybe go find somebody else to play with.
I feel like it's equally okay, though, at the start of that session to, hey, I had my heart set on Iron Gods. You as a GM are equally deserving of fun.
Yeah, I agree.
If that's what you wanted to play and your players don't want to do that, especially in the case where it's like a looking for game, then it's like, look, this is what I'm running. If you're not going to be invested in it, I'm just going to find a new group of people to play it.
It's your free time.
I think that's like on the GM who's posting a game for people to sign up for. Like say, hey, this is what I'm running. I have 4 slots. If it's a looking for game situation, and you're really just saying, okay, here's what I'm running. you're basically filling slots for that game, right? Like,
I mean,
so
to an
it's
extent, that's what it feels like. I could imagine. I guess I don't
well,
know.
yeah, but like, so what I'm saying is, I put out, hey, I'm gonna run Iron Gods on the LFG Reddit subreddit, right? You know, and there's five seats at the table. Give me a shout, and then I get 5 people there, and then we start playing, and one of them's like, "Oh, I don't want to play Iron Gods." I was like, "Well, absolutely." I'd be like, "Well, why did you show up to this Iron Gods game?"
Yeah. Why are you here,
know?
brah?
Yeah, like
Why did you
I
play?
feel like you're the only one that could tell what you want.
so, like
So
I just
why
think
did you
that
want this?
that's like even pre-session 0, dude. That's just like
Yeah.
a cross communication of like the borderline expectation. It's like showing up at a table being like, "Oh, we're not playing Scrabble."
I think it's as important as the initial contract, right? You ask your players to come up with characters that have a reason to want to be a part of whatever adventure you're running. Go a step further. I want you to come as players that have an interest in being a part of the whatever I'm running.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you're
Have
not,
the
and if it's your
opportunity.
friends, you pivot. If it's not your friends, you say deuces,
Next.
dude.
Yeah,
I'm
get out of here.
next group of people, man.
that's-
I'm a GM. I'm a hot commodity. Let's go.
Yeah, if you have the
think that's-
opportunity to lay down what you want to play, for sure, pick the
I think-
players who want to play it.
Okay, so but back to, because Tyler did have a good place is coming from with that question, and a good point about that. And if you're a new GM coming to the LFG space and saying, "Hey, I want to do something," and you're feeling cool about it, and then you get to that session 0 and it falls apart, that's okay. And I would suggest that if you're starting as a GM in an LFG space, that you probably should stay away from adventure paths to start with and just run a couple modules or adventures, because like
Keep it short.
Yeah, absolutely.
well, just to like figure out how it's going to work for you. You know what I mean? You don't want to get committed to a 6-book. It's not that you're not capable. Anybody who's new can start an adventure path and run an adventure path. That's not it. It's that when you're doing an LFG, you're like literally in a social contract. Like, these aren't your friends. These are people who are like expecting you to be there as the GM. Don't commit yourself to 6 books of something that you have no concept of what the table dynamic is going to be, what your experience of running a game for strangers is going to be. If you're new, don't start with an AP.
Well, I'd extend that to players too. I think,
Yes.
I think as a
absolutely.
player, like don't make a 6-book commitment when you've never tried to play.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Like
Yeah.
play in a couple of society scenarios, play in a module, play in a short 1 or 2 or 3 shot homebrew. Like that kind of stuff is going to get your feet wet without disappointing other people. And realistically, like if you're new, you don't know that you like this hobby.
Yeah,
right?
what's going
I
to test
mean-
your commitment to the game? Like, because the reality of it is that it takes time to do this, like dedicated time. You know, like
Yeah.
if you want to do even a level 1 to level 3 adventure, that's easily 3 to 4 sessions of scheduling, meeting up, and playing them for a
Yeah.
couple hours. You know what I mean? Like,
For us, that was 23 2-hour episodes.
yeah,
2 hours.
right. Like, it can get there for sure. Like, it's just, don't jump in the deep end in a completely stranger situation. Like, you want to jump in the deep end with your friends there.
Mm.
Well, I think moral of the story is like take precautions so that session 0 doesn't fall flat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Be willing
And-
to adjust.
Be willing to adjust if you're with a group of friends that you certainly want to play with, and be stern when you're GMing for randos because you deserve fun.
Exactly.
And I think that's
You-
like
you put the
That's how you should
label on the
play.
table of what it's going to be at that point. Like, like you don't owe anybody anything in that situation. Like
Absolutely not.
you're offering to run a table for strangers. So like,
Yeah.
you got to run what you're comfortable with and run it. You know,
If
like
you put out
just
there that you're gonna run Iron Gods for strangers, you better like buckle down to Iron Gods for strangers. Strangers don't come ready to run Iron Gods.
You know,
Like,
I
need to
love
run
I
these
love the way
strangers.
that Allard just like puts a bow on the point there, man.
Yeah.
I think that's what
Fucking
we're gonna-
buckle up, Buttercup. We're gonna have a rough time.
Yeah.
Oh man.
this is what we're running. Come on, you said you were okay with this. Don't make.
Haven't you read the technology guide to Galarian?
I
Idiot.
sent it to you. I sent it to you.
I sent you a PDF I paid for.
You know, and I think
I paid
think we
$13 for this. You didn't read it.
I
Well,
think
I'm gonna call that last call, y'all,
for
and
sure.
let's finish our drinks.
Oh, yeah.
Cheers, boys.
Mine's gone.
Cheers. See you next month.
See you
See you
next
there.
time.
La, 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 la.